Hello everyone, my name is Zenitsu and I'm back with another Digimon deck profile video. So today I'm going to be taking a look at EX4, and the EX4 offers us lots of new and powerful tools to be able to build and iterate on some new and existing decks. So today's deck I'm going to be taking a look at is going to be an updated version of Sakuyamon. So Sakuyamon is a deck that's all centered around utilizing your options as effectively and efficiently as you possibly can, and the main style of option that she wants to take advantage of is the usage of all of our different plugins to have a nice toolbox of abilities for us to have access to when we need it. So the deck is still going to be centered around the usage of these plugins, and Kazuhamon just adds more tech and utility to further enhance what the deck was trying to do. So with all that said and done, let's just dive right into the deck profile. Starting off with the Digitama, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Viximon because Viximon is the best Digitama for this deck to work with, because we're already wanting to play our different options, and this card is rewarding us for utilizing our options with some decent card draw. Next, on to the rookies, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Renamon. So this is the BT10 version of Renamon, and this is a really good consistency tool to try to help dig out for our plugin options and our yellow tamer. Then on top of that, for us utilizing our option when we're in our higher stage Digimon, it's going to reward us with some extra control elements with some nice DP reduction towards one of the opponent's Digimon. Next, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Renamon. So this is the EX2 version of Renamon, and she's going to be doing a lot of very similar stuff to what we just saw with the BT10 version. So the on-play ability is also going to be a nice consistency tool, trying to dig out specific parts and pieces, more specifically our Rika tamer, which is the main tamer of the deck, and our various other Digimon that aren't Renamon. So it's looking for Kyubimon, Taomon, and Sakuyamon. Then the inheritable ability, just like the BT10 version, is also rewarding us when we're playing our options that cost 2 or more, except instead of trying to control the opponent's field, this is trying to enhance and extend some of our plays by giving us some extra memory to be able to work with. And then the last rookie of the deck is going to be 4 copies of Renamon. So this is the brand new EX4 version of Renamon, and the main reason why I don't want to run another Digitama is because of this card having the special Digivolution condition, where she digivolves more efficiently on top of our Viximon. So if we were to run a different egg, we would potentially have to pay a little bit more for this card. Then on top of that, she's not adding any consistency to the deck, but she does have a really good on-play ability to try to help stunlock some of the opponent's Digimon to keep them from attacking. The important thing to note is that with this ability, it only requires the opponent's Digimon to be at 4000 DP or less to target, but as long as they fall victim to this ability, no matter if they digivolve or increase the DP, they won't be able to attack with their Digimon. Then the inheritable ability is doing exactly the same thing as what we just saw with the EX2 version of Renamon, rewarding us with some extra memory when we use our option cards. Next, on to the champions, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Kyubimon. So this is the BT10 version of Kyubimon, and this is kind of a tech or flex spot for the deck, and it could really be anything you want it to be, but I'm just going to be using it because I do care about the Kyubimon name for some name-based synergies and interactions, on top of the fact that it's still playing around with the plugins, which is the core theme of the deck, on how to use our plugins to their utmost potential. So what this card is adding to the deck is the fact that it has a modular when digivolving ability, so you get to use one of the 2 effects based on what you need at any given moment. So you either get to return a plugin from your trash back into your hand, so having some nice recyclability to be able to make sure we can always grab back the options that we want to use if one ends up in the trash is always nice, on top of the fact that if we have too many options and plugins in our hand, then we could trash a plugin to be able to draw 2 to try to draw into something more useful, which is really good either way on how we want to approach utilizing this card. Next, I'm going to be running 4 copies of the EX2 version of Kyubimon. So the EX2 version of Kyubimon is a really good card because when we go up into it, it's going to be, yet again, another consistency tool, trying to look for our plugin option cards, more specifically. But what we really care about is the fact that it has an inheritable that's rewarding us for utilizing our options, where it's doing the exact same thing as the BT10 Renamon, where it's just applying a nice debuff onto the opponent's Digimon when we utilize our option, so that way we could stack it all on one Digimon and try to remove one large threat, or try to split it up onto multiple different bodies, depending on the matchup and the board state. And then the last champion of the deck is going to be 4 copies of Yukomon. So Yukomon is also treated as a Kyubimon, so it still fits on brand and on theme with the rest of the deck, on top of the fact that it has a special Digivolution condition that incentivizes us to want to run an all Renamon low end, so that way we don't accidentally anti-tempo ourselves just because it digivolves more efficiently on top of Renamons. Then she has a really good on-play and when digivolving ability that's adding some extra defense into the deck by allowing us to give one of our Digimon the blocker ability for a turn. And on top of all of that, she even has an inheritable ability that we've just seen off of our EX2 Kyubimon, where it's applying that same debuff for us utilizing our options. So that way we have consistency on the types of abilities we want to see as well. And then when it comes to the ultimates, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Taomon. So this is the BT10 version of Taomon, and I kind of was going back and forth on the ratios between this and the EX2 version of Taomon, but I ultimately decided that I wanted to run the BT10 version of Taomon just because it requires less pieces to be super impactful and effective. So what her when digivolving ability is doing is we get to use a plugin option from our hand for free, ignoring its color requirements, so that way if we don't have a tamer set up, we don't need one to be able to make our plugins as useful as we can possibly make them. Next, I'm going to be running 2 copies of the EX2 version of Taomon. So the EX2 Taomon is still a very good card just because this is going to be setting up our Rika Tamers for free, which is really nice because our Rika Tamers, it allows us to do even more powerful things with our plugins and allows us to be as efficient as we can possibly be. Then on top of that, she has an inheritable ability where it's just adding more DP reduction for us utilizing our options. And then the last ultimate of the deck is going to be 1 copy of Taomon. So Taomon is kind of the black sheep of the deck in terms of the level 5s that we want to use, because this is really only super useful in combination with our brand new level 6 Kyubimon. But it's still a very decent card for the deck, even just as a generic Digimon for us to use, because it's going to be treated as a Taomon as well for all of the name-based synergies. It digivolves a little bit more efficiently on top of Kyubimons, which all of our level 4s are Kyubimons as of this build, and it still has a pretty good inheritable ability that's still reducing the opponent's Digimon's DP for us utilizing our options. The on-play and when digivolving ability is going to be a little bit more situational and conditional, but we could set it up thanks to all of our DP reduction abilities, and the alternative form of removal could actually help put the opponent slightly off their game because they might not be expecting or anticipating this type of removal, allowing us to bounce one of the opponent's Digimon with 6,000 DP or less back to their hand. Next, on to the Megas, I'm going to be running 1 copy of Sakuyamon Maid Mode. So Sakuyamon Maid Mode is still just a really good card for us to run, obviously because of all of the different ways that we could utilize this card. So if we need to use it as just a generic level 6, we could, because it still digivolves on top of level 5s, but she also can digivolve on top of our yellow level 6s, so that way we could use her as basically like a pseudo level 7. But what this card is doing is her when digivolving ability allows us to use a plugin or a yellow option that costs 5 or less for free and without meeting its color requirements, and then when we're done with the option, she's going to put it into our security face down instead of our trash, so that way we could gain the benefits off of our plugin security abilities as well. Then not only does she let us just play those cards for free and basically recover, her when attacking ability allows us to digivolve into a Sakuyamon from our hand for 1 and ignore the Digivolution requirements, allowing us to basically form change into our other level 6s. And speaking of our other level 6s, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Sakuyamon. So Sakuyamon has a nice when digivolving ability that allows us to unsuspend one of our Digimon, and for each tamer we have in play, we could return a plugin from our trash back into our hand, not only allowing us to be able to add some extra aggression or defensive capabilities based on the type of stack and situations we're put in, but to also recur the options that we need to be able to use them as effectively as we can with our other cards. Then on top of that, she has a nice ability that triggers when we use our options that allows one of our opponent's Digimon to get minus 3000 DP as a debuff. So if we combine this with all of our other debuffs, we could really start to customize how we're going to approach removing the opponent's threats or debuffing their Digimon to put them in range of some of our specific abilities. And then the last level 6 of the deck is going to be the brand new Kazuhamon. So Kazuhamon is also treated as a Sakuyamon, so it still works perfectly fine with our Sakuyamon synergies and more specifically our Sakuyamon Maid mode. Then she has a nice when digivolving ability where we get to use an option card from our hand that's 5 or less for free, so it allows us to basically just play one of our plugins, on top of the fact that she has a secondary ability that's playing off of her when digivolving ability for when we use an option that has a play cost of 2 or more. We could play a Taomon or a level 4 blue or yellow Digimon from this card's Digivolution source for free to be able to not only set up a second stack, but utilizes some more abilities as well. Next, on to the Tamers, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Rika. So Rika is realistically the only tamer we need in the deck. She's going to be the deck's dedicated memory fixing tamer to allow us to try to be as efficient as we could possibly be with our cards, on top of the fact that she's going to add even more efficiency with our Digimon when they're going to be attacking. As long as they're a Renamon, Kyubimon, Taomon, or Sakuyamon, then we get to suspend this tamer to use a plugin option from our hand for free. And speaking of our plugins, we're going to be running a slew of different options in the deck. So I'm going to be running 1 copy of Offense Plugin A, is just allowing our Digimon to gain Security Attack Plus, so we could try to push for more damage when we need to, on top of the fact that it's still trying to help out with the consistency on trying to find our tamers when it's checked in security, while still adding itself into our hand, so we could use it when we need to. Next, I'm going to be running 1 copy of High Speed Plugin D. So High Speed Plugin D gives our Digimon jamming, so that way the attack is going to be as safe into the opponent's security as we could possibly make it, on top of the fact that it allows our Digimon not to be blocked by the opponent's Digimon. Yes, they still can redirect, but still having some way to try to turn off some of the opponent's defensive plays is really, really nice, with the security allowing us to draw a card and add this card into our hand. Next, I'm going to be running 1 copy of Reinforcing Memory Boost. So even though Reinforcing Memory Boost isn't a plugin, it's still an option that costs 2 or more, and it's still a very powerful option. So powerful, in fact, that it is actually limited to 1 copy. So what this card is doing is it allows us to look at the top 2 cards of our deck, put one of them into our security face down, and put the other one into our hand. Then this card will go into the battle area to set up its secondary ability of Delay to be able to gain 3 memory at a later turn to make some really powerful and explosive plays possible. Next, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Yellow Memory Boost. So Yellow Memory Boost, even though it's not a plugin, it again is still an option that costs 2 or more, so it still works with a lot of our cards, and this is just a really good card in general just because it's adding to the overall consistency of the deck, allowing us to try to look at the top 4 for a yellow Digimon and add it to our hand, while again, like Reinforcing Memory Boost, adds this card into the battle area to use for its secondary ability of Delay to gain 2 memory at a later turn, which isn't as much as Reinforcing Memory Boost, but still pretty useful to have that extra memory to make more powerful plays possible. Then, to round out the rest of the plugins that the deck is going to be running, I'm going to be running 3 copies of Digivolution Plugin S. So Digivolution Plugin S allows us to draw a card and basically digivolve into a Digimon whose Digivolution costs 3 or less for free, so that way we could try to digivolve up our stages as cheaply and efficiently as we possibly can. This is really good for going into our level 5s and even into our level 6s, and even into some possible form changes with Sakuyamon Maid mode. Then on top of that, it has a nice security ability that is also trying to help increase increase the overall consistency of the deck by allowing us to look at the top 3, add a Digimon from among them into our hand, the rest go to the bottom, and this card will go into our hand to use when we need it. Next, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Defense Plugin C. So Defense Plugin C is a very important card for this deck just because it's adding some extra protections that the deck doesn't necessarily have compared to a lot of other competitive decks. So it's not only adding some extra defensive lines of play by giving our Digimon blocker and reboot, but it also allows our Digimon to not be deleted by the opponent's card effects, which is really, really powerful at just trying to maintain a board state and try to keep our Digimon alive as best as we possibly can. Then on top of that, it also has a really good security ability where it's checking the top 3 cards of our deck, and we get to play a Digimon whose play cost is 4 or less from among them for free, which we could then use to not only try to set up a secondary stack, but we do have some pretty good on-play abilities that we could pair up with this ability to not only up our consistency, but also potentially disrupt the opponent's game plan as well, while this card is also still adding itself into our hand. And then the last plugin of the deck is technically not really a plugin, but it counts as a plugin, so it still is one, and that's going to be 1 copy of Digital Translator. So Digital Translator is a really interesting card, essentially allowing us to use our level 6s and form change them when we need to, while its security ability also adds some recyclability for our Digimon by allowing us to grab 1 Digimon from our trash and add it back into our hand, while adding this card back into our hand as well, making it so that we have a couple of interesting setups that we could do off of this card. And then when it comes to the game plan and gameplay of the deck, this is a very complicated deck to understand all of the nuances on how it functions between utilizing your options and your Digimon as best and efficiently as you possibly can, on top of having a lot of rule understanding between the timing on how you're going to be utilizing your options and when your Digimon's abilities are going to be triggering. So this is just going to be a gross oversimplification just to give you a base foundation and understanding on how to be able to begin to approach this deck, but I would recommend you look up more information on how to be able to utilize their cards to their utmost potential. So when it comes to the level 3s and how we're going to be utilizing our level 3s, I think that the best one in the raising area is actually going to be the EX4 Renamon, just because its play cost is a little bit higher than the others, making it more expensive. Plus, we wanted to have it in our inheritables to be able to set up with our Kazuhamon's ability to be able to spit it out and split it apart. And if we don't necessarily see the EX4 Renamon, we still have the consistency on that inheritable ability with our EX2 Renamon, but I think that the EX2 Renamon and the BT10 Renamon are better digging tools that we want to play to look for our parts and pieces while try to set up a secondary stack. So for this example, I'm going to use the EX2 Renamon in the raising area, but it realistically doesn't matter which of the level 3s that we're using, just because they're all doing some very similar things. Then when it comes to the level 4s, I think, again, it really doesn't matter which level 4 that you're going to be using, as long as you're using Yukomon, or you're going to be using EX2 Kyubimon, just because their inheritable abilities are basically the exact same, and they both have nice benefits that we can gain off of when digivolving into them. I think that if you're trying to make a really powerful, cute, and cheeky play, you could go into the BT10 Kyubimon, but this is better used on your secondary stack just to be able to proactively do stuff while you're trying to dig for more parts and pieces, specifically for your Digimon that you're hiding in your raising area. So it doesn't necessarily matter which of these 2 you're going to use. I think, again, if your intention is to use Kazuhamon, then the Yukomon is going to be the best target just because it actually has an on-play ability that we could utilize. Then when it comes to the level 5s, again, it really doesn't matter which level 5 that you're going into, as long as you have the proper abilities to be able to utilize them as effectively as you possibly can. So you're going to want to hide your Digimon as a level 4 in your raising area. Depending on how much memory the opponent gives, depends on kind of where and how you want to make your plays. So you're going to raise out your Digimon at this point. If you have your Tamer in your hand, you're going to want to try to play your Taomon to try to set up your tamer so you don't need to do that later. I find that this is a little bit more effective and efficient to use off of your secondary stack if your secondary stack lives that long or up to this level. But if you don't have a secondary stack and you just want to set up a tamer, then the Taomon is still really, really good to use. If you just want to try to control the field, then the Daomon is pretty good, and you're going to want to try to get Daomon in the inheritables again to try to set up Kazuhamon. So depending on what you see, it doesn't really matter, just because Kazuhamon can play basically almost any Digimon from our stack for free when we use our options. Then the most optimal choice in terms of if we're starved for resources is probably going to be the BT10 Taomon, which is why I'm prioritizing it, because I don't need the tamer to be able to utilize this card, and I just need a plugin to use, and it could use any plugin for free. So I could use something like a defense plugin to try to have some defensive options, buy myself a turn, and wait while I'm trying to set up my level 6, or I could use something like Digivolution plugin S to be able to digivolve right away into my level 6 to be able to use it as efficiently as I possibly can. So you do have some good flexibility on how you could approach it utilizing your options when you're digivolving into the BT10 Taomon. But when it comes to utilizing the level 6s, this is where things start to get a little bit more complicated because of how we could approach utilizing Digital Translator and our Digivolution plugin S. So the base one we actually want to try to go into is going to be either Sakuyamon or it's going to be a Kazuhamon. So if you're going to be using Sakuyamon, this with Digital Translator gives us the accessibility to be able to digivolve into Kazuhamon or into Sakuyamon Maid mode. But if we're utilizing Kazuhamon, then we only have access at Sakuyamon Maid mode to use. But most of the time, we're trying to set up the Sakuyamon to go into a Maid mode, to then use Maid mode to go into Kazuhamon or Sakuyamon, and then from here, that allows us to use Digital Translator to go into another Kazuhamon. So you could kind of see, thanks to Digital Translator and the name-based synergies and interactions, how complicated it could be utilizing the form changes between all of your level 6s. But basically, the whole reason on why you're trying to use your level 6s on top of each other and coinciding with one another is literally to be able to use their when digivolving abilities or when attacking abilities over and over again, just because we could trigger them multiple times in a single turn with the right setups and power play. And the fact that we get rewarded heavily for utilizing our options and potentially use our options for free just make it easier to be able to utilize all of the different plugins that we have, especially since we also have the ability to try to recycle whatever plugin that we need at any given moment. The deck's core or base is just centered around the use of the EX2 line, BT10 line, and EX4 line, so for the most part, the majority of the core does kind of just build itself on top of you just customizing your options based on your own personal preferences, and there is some other tech and tools that you could incorporate into the deck depending on what cards you have access to and the type of abilities that you're looking to gain going into what meta you're expecting to go up against. So if you wanted to, we do have the old BT5 Renamon line that we could work with. I think that the most usable card out of that whole line is going to be the BT5 Renamon, just because it has an on-play ability that we could use in combination with a defense plugin and Kazuhamon to try to disrupt the opponent, but we also do have some other yellow floodgates that we could run, again, depending on what you're expecting out of the given meta you're going into. Then when it comes to the level 4s, there's not really a whole lot of flexibility on the level 4s. If you really wanted to, you could think about teching or splashing in some hybrids, again, depending on how you're approaching your deck's build. We could try to support this hybrid build between what Sakuyamon is doing and our hybrids, and even think about running something like Rise Greymon to try to have another way to be able to set up our tamers. But the main draw is if we have enough tamers set up, then our Digimon is naturally just going to have Security Attack Plus, so we could try to deal as much damage as we possibly can, especially since we do have a red plugin to try to increase the damage and blue plugin to try to make that damage safe. And even if we're playing into the whole hybrid sub-theme, we do have the one copy of Jet Sylphimon we're allowed to use, just because trying to get up into the level 6 and utilize the level 6 as effectively as we possibly can is the main goal and intention of the deck, and utilizing Jet Sylphimon with the hybrids is just super efficient at being able to do that. Then when it comes to the other level 6s, there's not really a whole lot of other level 6s that I would recommend using, just because we are focused on trying to utilize our options, and there's no other level 6 that allows us to be able to utilize them as best as what the Sakuyamon line is trying to do in EX4, EX2, and BT10. So instead, you could think about trying to run a level 7 just to try to cap things off even better and do some other very powerful and impactful things, with Shine-Greymon Ruin Mode being one of the newest and most powerful level 7s that the deck has access to. Then we do have some other cute tech and tools that we could think about running, like Kyubimon for some extra draw and DP gain. And then when it comes to some of the other options that you could think about incorporating, we do have a lot of really powerful options that we can utilize. I would probably lean towards the options that cost 5 if you're looking for removal. You could run some of the more expensive removal, and that's totally fine, but we do get more efficiency out of our options costing 5, so that way we could try to stack a whole bunch of DP reductions and be able to delete the Digimon as cheaply and efficiently as we possibly can, like with Megalospark. Or if you wanted to just try to disrupt and stall out the opponent, we could even utilize some various other utility cards to try to disrupt them, and to utilize a card like Holy Flame to stop a lot of their potential aggression. Then we do have some other tamers that double down and incentivize not only just the usage of other colors, but the usage of our options as well, in the form of Mimi. And then if you're going with yellow hybrids, then you'd probably want to incorporate the yellow hybrid tamer, but there is just a whole bunch of other good generic yellow tamers that you could think about incorporating into the deck, again, depending on what you want to prioritize in terms of the effects and abilities you're trying to gain out of that tamer. So that's all I really have for this video. As always, feel free to tell me your thoughts down in the comments below, and down in the description below are a couple of different ways you could support me and the channel. So I do have a TCG Player affiliate link, so when you use that link to buy cards off of TCG Player, then some of that money will go to supporting me and the channel. I also do make and sell playmats over on Overcard Gamers on Facebook, so when you buy a playmat with my design, then some of that money will also go to help supporting me and the channel. And on top of all of that, I do have a Twitch account over on twitch.tv/Zenitsu, so giving me a follow and a subscription also helps support me there, and I do play Digimon on top of various other games on that platform as well. So thank you everyone for watching, and as always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content, and I'll see you in the next video.